Szanowni Państwo, już wkrótce rozpoczniemy
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of liberation of Auschwitz. May I once again request setting your mobiles to mute and taking no photographs during the official part of our commemoration. May I also reiterate that Polish is on channel 1, channel 2 is English, channel 3 is Hebrew, and channel 4 is Russian.
Ladies and gentlemen, the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz will start soon. Please once again mute your mobile phones and do not make pictures during the official part of the commemoration. The commemoration will be translated. Let me remind you, channel 1 is Polish, the second channel it's English, the third one is Hebrew, and the fourth one is Russian. Szanowni Państwo,
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen,
pragnę powitać
I would like to welcome to this commemoration former inmates of the camp and Holocaust survivors.
głowy koronowane,
May I welcome your highnesses, presidents, prime ministers, and all the heads of parliaments and heads of state delegations.
witam przedstawicieli
May I
Parlamentu
welcome
Polskiego,
representatives of the Polish Parliament and parliamentarians from Europe and the world.
witam członków rządu,
May I welcome members of governments from Poland, Europe and the world.
witam reprezentantów korpusu
I
dyplomatycznego,
welcome representatives of the diplomatic
witam
corps,
darczyńców, którzy
the
wsparli
donors
Fundusz
who have
Wieczysty
support
Fundacji
Pillars
Auschwitz-Birkenau,
of Memory,
Filary
Auschwitz
Pamięci.
Foundation Endowment Fund.
Witam
May I
reprezentantów
welcome
kościołów,
representatives of
wspólnot
churches
religijnych,
and religious communities,
wspólnot i gmin
notably
żydowskich,
communes
a
and
także
communities
społeczności
of the Jewish society, and also
Witam
the
przedstawicieli
representatives
władz
of the Roma,
regionalnych i samorządowych.
representatives of regional
Witam
authorities and
reprezentantów
local governments,
wszystkich instytucji
representatives
i
of all the institutions and
oraz wszystkie
organizations,
pozostałe
and
osoby,
all
które
the other
przybyły na
people who have
dzisiejszy obchód.
arrived at this commemoration.
O zabranie głosu proszę
May I
prezydenta
now request
Rzeczypospolitej
the address
Polskiej,
from the President of the
pana
Republic of
Andrzeja
Poland,
Dudę.
Mr. Andrzej Duda.
Czcigodni ocalali,
Honorable survivors,
zagłady,
witnesses of the Holocaust,
Wasze królewskie mości,
your
Wasze
Royal
książęce
Highnesses,
wysokości, Szanowni
your
Państwo prezydenci,
serenities,
premierzy, ministrowie,
your excellencies, presidents, prime ministers, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen.
na rampę zajechał właśnie
A
pociąg.
train has just arrived at the
Z
unloading ground.
towarowych wagonów
People started to get off the freight wagons
i szli w kierunku
and
lasu.
walked towards the grove.
Kiedy wstawałem z
When
rana
I
do
got
mycia
up in the
podłogi,
morning to wash the
ludzie szli.
floor, people were walking,
Kobiety,
women,
mężczyźni i
men,
dzieci.
and children.
Wychodziłem nocą
I
przed
went out
blok,
at
w
night
ciemności świeciły lampy
in
nad
front of the
drutami.
block. I
Droga
could
leżała w
see
mroku,
lamps
lecz
shining
słyszałem
over the barbed
wyraźnie
wire in the
oddalony gwar
darkness.
wielu
The road lay
tysięcy
in the
głosów.
darkness, but I could clearly
Ludzie
hear the
szli
distant hubbub of thousands of
szli.
voices. People
Z lasu
walked
podnosił
on
się
and
ogień i
on.
rozświetlał niebo,
Fire
a wraz
rose
z
from the
ogniem
woods and lit
podnosił
up
się
the
ludzki
sky,
krzyk.
and with the fire, a human cry
Przez dnie i
rose.
noce
For days
ludzie
and
szli.
nights, people continued walking.
na rampę nieprzerwanie
The wagons
przyjeżdżały
were constantly
wagony
coming up to the
i
ramp,
ludzie szli dalej.
and people were walking on.
Tak ukazał
This is how Auschwitz
latem
was described in the summer of 1944 by a Polish inmate of the camp,
Tadeusz Borowski.
writer Tadeusz Borowski.
Tłumy ludzi idących,
Crowds of people
prowadzonych,
walking,
zapędzanych
driven
na
to
masową śmierć.
mass death.
My w Polsce
We in
dobrze znamy
Poland
prawdę o
know
tym, co
well
tu
the
się
truth
działo.
about what was happening here,
Opowiadali nam to nasi rodacy,
as it was
którzy
recounted by
wytatuowali
our
obozowe
compatriots
numery.
who had camp numbers tattooed on their bodies by Germans.
Mija 75 lat.
It's been 75 years since the end of that monstrous, horrendous, and criminal
W
nightmare
tym miejscu
that was unfolding in this
rozgrywał się
place
przez blisko 5 lat.
for nearly 5 years.
Mijają już
It has been
prawie 3 pokolenia od
3
tamtego
generations
dnia,
since that
27
day,
stycznia
the 27th of January 1945,
kiedy
when
kilka
a
tysięcy
few thousand
więźniów
prisoners,
wycieńczonych okrucieństwem
victims of
oprawców,
cruelty,
niewolniczą pracą,
exhausted by slave work, hunger, and disease,
doczekało się
lived to see
wreszcie wyzwolenia
finally the liberation
przez żołnierzy
by the soldiers
Armii Czerwonej.
of the Red Army.
Są tu dziś wśród nas
We have
ostatni
here with us
żyjący
today
ocaleni,
the last living
którzy
survivors,
przeżyli piekło Auschwitz,
people who endured the hell of Auschwitz,
którzy na
the
własne
last of
oczy
those
widzieli
who saw
zagładę,
the Holocaust with their own eyes,
którzy
and among them
doświadczyli
those
losu
who
narodu
experienced the
żydowskiego,
fate of the Jewish
o którym
nation,
mówi Psalm
as
44.
referred to in the Psalm
Zabijają
44.
nas przez cały dzień,
We are killed all day long.
uważają nas
We are
za
considered
owce
as sheep
prowadzone na rzeź.
to be slaughtered.
Zgromadziliśmy się tutaj.
We have come here together,
Członkowie 61
members of
delegacji
61
z całego
delegations
świata,
from all over the world,
aby wspólnie uczcić
to
Międzynarodowy
commemorate
Dzień
jointly the International Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Stajemy
We are standing
przed bramą
in
obozu,
front of the gate
w którym
leading to the
śmierć
camp
poniosło najwięcej
that claimed
ofiar
lives
i
of
który
the
stał się
largest number of
symbolem
victims,
zagłady.
and that has become the symbol of the Shoah.
Wszystkim 6 milionom
We pay
Żydów,
tribute to all the 6 million Jews murdered in this and in the other camps,
gettach,
in the ghettos
miejscach
and
kaźni,
places of martyrdom
na ulicach
and
miast,
torture, in
miasteczek.
the streets of cities and small
Stajemy
towns.
tutaj przed wami,
We stand here before
godni
you,
ocaleni, aby
honorable
w obliczu
survivors,
świadków zagłady podjąć
to
jeszcze
assume
raz
anew
zobowiązanie.
in the presence of the witnesses of the Holocaust
Podjąć
an
zobowiązanie
obligation.
z myślą o tych,
This is an obligation we take thinking of those who perished,
którzy
of you
ocaleliście,
who have survived,
ale i o przyszłych
and
pokoleniach.
of the future generations as well.
Ludobójstwo
The genocide perpetrated here by the functionaries of the Nazi Third Reich
pochłonęło ponad 1
claimed
300
more
000
than
ludzkich
1,300,000 human
Byli wśród
lives.
nich Polacy,
Among them, there were
Romowie,
Poles, the Roma,
jeńcy sowieccy,
Soviet prisoners of
ale
war,
przede wszystkim Żydzi,
but first and foremost,
których
Jews,
zgładzono tu przeszło
whom
1
over
100
1,100,000 were slain
Mówimy o
here.
liczbach. A przecież
We are speaking about
to
numbers,
konkretni ludzie,
but these numbers represent concrete people, their life stories and their suffering.
choć
We're
zapewne
speaking
nigdy nie
about
poznamy ich
numbers,
dokładnie.
although we will certainly never get to know the exact
Mówimy o
figures.
liczbach, bo
Yet
jesteśmy w
we are
fabryce
speaking about
śmierci.
numbers as we are in the
Liczby
factory of death.
uzmysławiają nam
For
przemysłowy
numbers make us
charakter
realize the industrial
popełnionej tutaj
nature
zbrodni.
of the crime perpetrated here.
Holokaust,
The Holocaust,
którego Auschwitz
of
jest
which
głównym miejscem i
Auschwitz
symbolem,
is the main locus
był zbrodnią
and the main
wyjątkową
symbol,
w całych dziejach ludzkości.
constituted an unexampled crime throughout the entire history of humankind.
Nacjonalizm
Here, the hatred, chauvinism, nationalism, racism, anti-Semitism
brały tu
assumed the
postać
form of
masowego,
a mass and
zorganizowanego,
organized,
metodycznego
methodical murder.
Nigdy indziej
At no other
ani
time
nigdzie indziej
and at no other
nie
place
przeprowadzono
was
eksterminacji
extermination
ludzi w podobny
carried
sposób.
out in a similar manner.
Żydzi z Polski,
Jews from Poland,
Węgier,
Hungary,
Francji,
France,
Holandii,
the Netherlands,
Grecji
Greece,
i innych
and from
okupowanych
other
krajów
occupied
w
countries
całej
all over
Europie byli
Europe
tu przywożeni
were brought here in
bydlęcymi
cattle
wagonami,
cars.
poddawani
They underwent
selekcji i
selection
pozbawiani
and were
całego
deprived of all their
I w
belongings.
ogromnej większości
And in their vast majority,
natychmiast
they were
zabijani w
immediately
komorach,
killed in the gas chambers
spalani w
and
krematoryjnych
burned
piecach.
in the ovens of the crematoria.
Wszystko to trwało zaledwie godziny.
All of that took but a few hours, quarters, minutes.
Fabryka
For
śmierci
years, the factory of
przez lata
death
pracowała z pełną
operated
mocą.
at full capacity.
Dymiły kominy,
Smoke was rising from the chimneys, the transports were rolling.
szli i szli
People walked and walked in their thousands
na śmierć.
to meet their death.
Wszystko to dzisiaj
It is hard to encompass it all with your mind today.
ogrom,
The magnitude of the crime perpetrated in this place is
ale nie wolno nam
terrifying,
odwracać od niej oczu.
but we must not look away from it,
O niej nigdy zapomnieć.
and we must never forget it.
Kiedy zbliżał się front, który
When
miał
the
położyć
front was
koniec
approaching
zbrodni,
to put an end to the
sprawcy
crime,
usiłowali zatrzeć
the
jej
perpetrators attempted to
Niszczyli
obliterate its
budynki i
traces.
dokumentację
They would
ludobójstwa.
destroy the buildings and the documents of the genocide.
Chcieli unicestwić
Having slain
także i
millions,
pamięć.
they also wanted to wipe out the memory
To
of
się
them.
jednak nie udało.
However, their attempts
Uratowani
failed.
zostali świadkowie, z
Witnesses were saved,
których ostatnimi
of
jesteście
whom
wy.
you, honorable survivors, are the last
I
ones.
zachowane zostało to
And this
miejsce,
very place has been preserved,
materialny dowód
the tangible evidence and the symbol
Holokaustu.
of the Holocaust.
Stajemy więc dziś tu,
Hence, we stand here
na terenie
today
byłego
on the
niemieckiego
premises
obozu
of the
Auschwitz.
former German Auschwitz camp.
Stajemy wszyscy razem
We stand all together
i pochylamy
and
głowę
bow our heads
przed cierpieniami
before the
ofiar
suffering of the victims
najstrasznej-
of this most
najstraszniejszej
horrendous
w dziejach
crime in history,
I w obliczu
and
ocalonych,
before the
w
survivors,
obecności
in the
ostatnich
presence
świadków,
of the last witnesses,
podejmujemy
we do assume
zobowiązanie
an
na przyszłość.
obligation for the future.
W imieniu Rzeczypospolitej,
In the name of the Republic of
która
Poland,
pierwsza stała się
who was the
celem
first
agresji
target of
nazistowskiej,
Nazi Germany's aggression,
której
whose
terytorium
territory
znalazło
was
się pod
occupied
okupacją, a naród
and its
został
nation
poddany
was
terrorowi,
subjected to terror,
która
who established the largest European underground resistance movement against the Third Reich,
której
whose soldiers fought against Germans on all the fronts of the Second World War,
od jej pierwszego
from the first
do
to
ostatniego,
the last day of the war,
której 6
whose 6 million
milionów
citizens
obywateli zginęło
died
z
at the
rąk
hands
hitlerowców,
of Nazis,
w tym 3 miliony
including
Żydów,
3 million Jews,
i która
and who
podejmuje
makes an
wszelkie
utmost
starania o
effort
zachowanie
to
tego
preserve
miejsca,
this place,
terenu
the
obozu
premises of the
Auschwitz
Auschwitz camp,
oraz wszystkich
as well
innych
as
miejsc
all the other
zagłady
places of the
byłych
Shoah,
niemieckich obozów
the former German
znajdujących
camps
się na
located
naszej
in our territory.
W imieniu
I have the
Rzeczypospolitej
privilege
mam
and
przywilej
honor,
i zaszczyt
on behalf of the
ponowić
Republic of
zobowiązanie,
Poland, to renew the
które my,
obligation
Polacy,
that we,
przyjęliśmy na siebie już
Poles,
wtedy,
assumed
kiedy
back
dokonywał
then,
się Holokaust,
when the Holocaust
kiedy
was being carried
nasi
out,
poprzednicy
when
z
our
narażeniem
forefathers
własnego życia
came to
nieśli
the aid
ratunek
of the
mordowanym
murdered
Żydom.
Jews, putting their
Jako
own lives
pierwsi
at
nieśli
risk,
światu
who
prawdę
were the
o
first
zagładzie i
ones to
domagali się
reveal to the
reakcji
world the
światowych
truth
mediów
about the
stanu.
Shoah and demanded that the
którym
world's
zobowiązaniu
statesmen
my,
respond.
Współcześni Polacy,
The obligation to
również
which
ze
we,
względu na
the contemporary
pamięć o
Poles,
naszych
consistently
bohaterskich
adhere,
rodakach,
also for the sake of the memory of our heroic
czy Jan
compatriots, to mention Witold Pilecki and Jan Karski.
w imieniu Rzeczypospolitej
On behalf of the Republic of
mam
Poland,
przywilej i zaszczyt
it is my
ponowić
privilege
zobowiązanie,
and guard
zawsze pielęgnować pamięć i strzec
always
prawdy o tym,
nurture the memory and guard the truth about what happened here.
Pragnę zaprosić dziś
I
zgromadzonych
wish to invite
dostojnych
the
gości,
distinguished guests gathered here today,
państw i narodów,
representatives of
a
foreign
także
states and
instytucji
nations,
międzynarodowych i
as
wszystkich
well as
ludzi
international
dobrej woli na
institutions
całym
and all
świecie,
people of goodwill from across the world to participate in
Niech
this
będzie to
endeavor.
nasze wspólne
Let it be our
zobowiązanie,
joint commitment,
podjęte w obliczu
undertaken
ostatnich
before the
ocalonych
last
i
survivors
świata,
and witnesses,
nieść
to
dalej
keep carrying
przyszłość
into the
przesłania i
future
przestrogę
the message
dla
and the
całej
warning for the
ludzkości,
whole
które
mankind
płyną z tego
that
miejsca.
stem from this place.
Fałszowanie historii
Distorting the
II wojny
history of the
światowej,
Second World War,
zaprzeczanie
denying the
zbrodniom
crimes of
ludobójstwa i
genocide and the
negowanie
Holocaust,
oraz
as well as an
instrumentalne
instrumental use of
wykorzystywanie
Auschwitz to
jakichkolwiek
attain any
celów,
given goal
to bezczeszczenie
is tantamount to
pamięci ofiar,
desecration of the
których
memory of the
groby są
victims whose
rozsypane.
ashes are scattered here.
Prawda o
The
Holokauście
truth about the
nie
Holocaust
może umrzeć.
must not die.
Pamięć o
The memory of
Auschwitz
Auschwitz
musi trwać,
must last
żeby zagłada
so that
nigdy
such
więcej w
extermination
historii
is
świata
never
się nie
repeated again.
powtórzyła. Raz jeszcze
Once again,
dziękuję
thank
wam,
you,
czcigodni
honorable
ocaleni, za wasze
survivors,
świadectwo
for your
i
testimony
waszą tutaj
and for your
dzisiaj
presence
obecność.
here today.
Wieczna
May
pamięć,
the memory of
wszystkim
all the
ofiarom
victims of
Auschwitz.
Auschwitz
Wieczna
live
pamięć
eternally.
ofiarom
May the
Holokaustu.
memory of the victims of the Holocaust live eternally.
Teraz wysłuchajmy
And
świadków.
now, let us listen
O zabranie
to
głosu proszę
witnesses.
byłą więźniarkę obozu
May I ask
Auschwitz,
a
panią
former
Batshevę
Auschwitz
Dagan.
inmate, Batsheva Dagan, to take the floor.
Trudno. Witam was wszystkich serdecznym shalom z Izraela.
Welcome. Let me say shalom from Israel.
Trudno mi ukryć moje
It
uczucia.
is difficult for me to hide my feelings. I'm standing here in front of you. I'm not sure whether it is real or whether I'm dreaming that I am here with you 75 years
Wielkiej eskapadzie cierpienia
after
na tym miejscu.
what happened here, this great suffering that took place
Numer
here. My number was
45
45,554.
Po
Schutzhäftling
niemiecku to więzień pod
in
ochroną,
German
ale
is
tam,
an
to znaczy
inmate
tu,
under
w
protection.
tamtej rzeczywistości,
Here, then,
tej,
in
która
that
była
other reality that
słowo,
used
to
to
nie
unfold here,
oznaczało ochronę.
this word did not
Nie było tam
mean actually
czegoś
protection.
takiego jak troska o człowieka.
Care for another human being did not belong there. Human dignity did not belong there either. Quite the opposite.
Nie znajdziesz
Even
słowa,
if you
które
open a dictionary, you will not find a phrase that would describe how
godność człowieka.
human dignity was
A
trampled.
więc po co to słowo więzień?
So this
Dawano
word,
jeszcze dodatek pod
inmate,
ochroną.
and under
Schutzhäftling,
protection, Schutzhäftling,
więzień pod ochroną.
what was it for?
Więzień pogardy.
So much despise in there, in this devilish world, where human dignity
Nie było śladu
was treated
chronienia
as if it were dirt.
czegokolwiek.
There was no way of finding shelter anywhere. I am Häftling.
I będzie się ci wszyscy ludzie, którzy byli w lagrze, będą się na pewno
All those
bardzo
people
dziwić.
that were
Ale ja nie
in
miałam
a
pasiaka,
lager
bo
would
nie
be surprised,
starczyło.
but I did not have a striped uniform because there were
Dali
too
mi
few,
mundur rosyjskiego
and I was
żołnierza
given
na
a
gołym ciele
Russian soldier uniform.
i
I had to wear it
nogi były
on my body
owinięte
directly,
szalem
and my legs were wrapped in a praying shawl,
przyjętej u Żydów.
that shawl that is
Miałam
used by Jews.
holenderskie trepy,
And I had those Dutch
dwie nierówne.
wooden shoes.
A
Mind
co
you, they were
zrobili ze mną
uneven.
jeszcze? Oprócz
What else did they
numeru,
do
który
to
mi
me?
tatuowali,
First, they tattooed a
jest
number
dzisiaj
on my
zupełnie
arm,
tak, jak był wtedy.
and it is just as visible today as it was back then.
Zostało
It was very
wytatuowane.
well tattooed indeed.
Ja przede wszystkim tak,
So,
nie wiedziałam, nie poznałam siebie i gdyby to, że te bloki
I couldn't
miały
recognize
wysokie
myself.
okna,
Those blocks They had windows very high. I raised my hands, and that is when I recognized myself to be myself. The worst thing that I went through at the very beginning, well, it is hard to say actually what was more painful to me. Whether it was the process of tattooing a number on my arm or something else. I believe, though, that was what was the most hurtful for me was the loss of her, because the hair gave me a sense of belonging to womanhood, and they were smooth. This hair was my own, and this criminal hand touched my hair. This crown of mine was taken away from me, and I was turned into this pitiful, sad creature. My hand touched a naked skull, and I could see the contour of my face. I couldn't recognize myself. Is it really me? Where is my crown? And in the mirror, I recognized myself, or rather it was not a mirror, it was a glass, a window, and it was really me. Her braids were used for different purposes. Who could think back then that they would be used as a resource for mattresses? However, what they were really after was depriving me of my own human face, and hair would grow back as nature commanded. And there was this dream within my heart. It was still alive. Maybe tomorrow will come one day. And tomorrow did come indeed. Memories remained, though. And let me tell you something else. I worked in 4 commandos in the lager. The first one, I would collect herbs that were somewhat poisonous, and my hands would bleed 12 hours per day. As we sit here, we remember that we would be woken up at 4 a.m. because I was collecting nettle. And actually this nettle was used to make soup. This woman, Aufseher, everybody knows who she was, what this word means. She was really cruel. She had a dog, she had a stick, and she would beat us up. What she wanted was this basket of grass to be not only full but also packed. And I spent many years in this, or rather many months in this commando. And then there was the second one, Kartoffel Commando. I was there rather briefly. There was this Lagerstrasse, the street there. I met my cousin, and she was a doctor's wife. And she worked at what we call a revier. Chimneys, smoking on the one hand, and hospitals on the other. But hospitals, well, that's just a name. And I caught all the diseases you could think of. And I still remember the German names for all those diseases. And there was this itching all the time. I was the first best candidate to be sent to chimneys. Now, Dr. Mengele, when he inspected us, we would have to stand in rows naked, and we would be driven to death. But I said I wouldn't go, and I hid
pokrywą łóżka.
under a bed, under the cover,
Jakoś się ocaliłam z tego.
and somehow I saved myself in this way.
Jeszcze jedno komando.
And there was another commando later.
Pracowałam na rewirze i moją pracą codzienną było zabijać, patrzeć
So,
te wszy. I nauczyłam się
I
również, że
had to
są dwa
kill
rodzaje
lice, and I learned then that there are two
tych
types
stworzeń.
of those
Jedno
creatures.
to są wszy głowowe, a drugie
The first type of lice live on your heads,
wszy odzieżowe.
and the second type lives in your
Palcami.
clothes.
To była moja
So I would kill lice with my fingers. This would be the first job that I had to do in the morning.
wszystkim i byłam po tej mojej strasznej chorobie i po
I had been
tych
through a
chorobach
terrible diseases,
dostałam się
actually.
do komanda Kanada.
and Canada
Kanada to jest
was the next commando that I got in.
które sami
It was the inmates themselves who came up with this name.
Więc ja pracowałam w Kanadzie.
So I worked in Canada.
Z Węgier.
I'm sure that there are people here
Ja w
from
rękach
Hungary.
trzymałam węgierskie ubrania.
I would hold Hungarian clothes in my hands.
Tak na początku płakałam.
At first, I would cry, but then I had to get used to that because that was to become my job.
W tych wielkich górach różnych ubrań.
There were all those huge piles of clothes from different corners of the world.
Fotografie moich
And
nauczycieli
there,
z Łodzi.
I saw a photograph of my teachers from Lodz.
Była likwidacja
In 1944,
Polskiego.
the ghetto in Łódź was liquidated.
Spotkałam nie ludzi, tylko spotkałam w tym
So-
czasie jeszcze, bo getto istniało dłużej.
This was
Jak
my
się żyje
meeting.
w takim miejscu?
So how do you live
Więc
in such a place?
ponieważ szkoły żydowskie były zamknięte,
Jewish schools
postanowiłam
had been
się
closed down.
czegoś uczyć.
So I decided that I had to learn something. And there were all those languages that surrounded me. 15, maybe more people who work here will know better.
Ja słyszałam tyle języków i mówiłam,
So I would hear all those languages that surround me, and I thought I need to learn something. Well, I will learn a language. So
tą panią, która
I found this Belgian lady,
nauczycielką,
and she
bez
became
ołówka,
my
bez
teacher.
papieru,
I had no
bez
pencil, I
niczego.
had no paper,
I ja się
I had nothing to
uczę
help me.
i skończyłam
On I went with
Auschwitz-Birkenau
my learning.
słynnym francuskim.
So when I left Auschwitz-Birkenau, I spoke fluent French. There was another thing that I learned
I melodie,
here.
które tworzyli
Poems and melodies that were created by inmates.
jedną z nich była Krystyna Żywulska.
Krystyna Żywulska was one of them.
Jej wiersz stał się naszą modlitwą.
And her poem
Nauczyłam
became
się
our
tego
prayer.
wiersza. To jest bardzo długi wiersz.
It's a very long
będę
poem.
deklamowała,
I'm not going to
bo
recite it
znam
here.
jak wtedy.
I still know it by heart,
Wiersz
like I
Krystyny
did
Żywulskiej,
all those years ago.
Wymarsz w pole,
So
znany nam jako wymarsz za bramę.
this
I stał się naszą
poem, Krystyna Żywulska's poem, Marching Out into the Field, was known to me in the camp as Marching Out of the Gate, became our prayer here.
Tak opisać bolesną
The
rzeczywistość.
description of our suffering was an expression of each one of us. However, not every prisoner was able to describe the painful reality in such a manner. The main source of strength was the crazy lust of revenge for so much agony and so many complaints, bayonets into the brain and daggers to the neck. The words of revolt wandered from mouth to mouth and only changed slightly depending on the memory and personal association
Myśl o zemście
of female prisoners.
stała się źródłem źródłem siły
the thought
znieść
of revenge became a source of strength,
ludzkich cierpień.
allowing to endure the long days and nights of inhumane suffering.
I uczę się cały
I
czas.
continue
To
learning
mi pomogło
all the
przeżyć.
time. Now, what helped me to survive
Zdecydowałam zrobić
was that I myself decided to do something for myself. I decided to choose what I want rather than following
byłam wyzwolona
orders.
27.
However,
Dlatego, że się
did not get to be liberated on the
słyszeliśmy
27th
kanony ruskiej armii.
because we could hear the Russian army approaching, their cannons firing.
Nie było wyzwolenie, tylko było po prostu wygnali nas na marsz.
So basically, I did not get to experience this liberation. I was driven out and made to march.
Kropelkę wody, bo nie mogę.
Could I have some water, please?
Troszeczkę tylko, bardzo mało, dziękuję.
Just a little bit, not much.
Tak myślałam tam, to znaczy tutaj.
So
Tam
that's
w piekle
what I
był to
thought back
sen.
then.
Sen ściętej głowy, sen o wolności.
So it was a
Tam
dream,
serce biło
dream about
wykrzykiem
freedom,
zemsty,
and the heart
zemsty za tyle
beat
cierpień.
to the pace of revenge for all that suffering because we had to wait in a queue to death,
Kraje świata nie czyniły nic.
and
I
various
dopiero
countries
to
in the world
uczucie.
did nothing.
Gdzie żeście wy wszyscy
And I
byli?
still have this feeling today. Where was everybody?
I słyszał,
Where was the world who could see that, who could hear that, and yet did nothing to save all those thousands?
A co będzie dalej? Świat jest
So what
cały
now
tak. Ponieważ
with the world?
uczenie było moim marzeniem.
It was my
Kiedy
dream
byłam-
to learn.
Tak, jeszcze chciałam powiedzieć, jak to było. Przepraszam, jestem bardzo...
Apologies.
Tak więc powiem
Let me
z
just
serca,
say it
a nie
from
z
the
papieru.
bottom of my heart, rather than reading out from a piece of paper.
W Auschwitz-Birkenau do likwidacji obozu.
So
I moją ostatnią pracą
I was meant to liquidate Auschwitz-Birkenau. What was my last job in Canada?
które było nadane przez więźniów.
Mind you, Canada was a name that Sonderkommando, the inmates, came up with.
Bo Kanada jest bogaty kraj.
Canada is a rich country,
A
isn't
tam
it?
wszystkie rzeczy, które przynieśli ze
And in
sobą
Canada,
więźniowie ze
there were all
wszystkich
these
krajów,
items brought with them by all those
były
inmates from all these
zebrane w
countries.
Kanadzie i tam trzymałam.
This is where they were
Tam to
collected,
wszystko widziałam.
and I saw it all.
Ale Kanada miała jeden plus, że tam
Now,
było co jeść.
the upside to working in Canada was that you could eat things. We would eat whatever was brought by people,
W różnych krajach, że jadą
because people coming here had been told that they were being taken to work they had been asked to take some food with them. So all this food was being brought to Canada. And we were sickly and thin. We would eat that. Can you eat such things? Well, back then, anything was possible. There was one more thing that helped us to live in this hell: friendship. You could find a group of people who would help one another. Shoah, the Holocaust, are not only about the terrible things. And what about the righteousness among the nations that helped? There are many other things, subjects that can be told to children. I have the struggle, namely, I would like the subject to be introduced at an earlier stage. Why so? In various countries where children are 13, 15 years old, it's already too late. Because at this point they are undergoing certain physiological changes. And what they think about is themselves and their position in a social group. So a question: is it necessary to teach that subject? Is it possible? I have an answer to those questions. Yes, it is very much necessary, and it is by all means possible. Why is it truly necessary? We live in the world of the media, and we have those phones, iPhones, whatever its name is. People play with those objects, even toddlers. So children grow up playing with those iPhones, and they know more than we would like them to know. For that reason, this subject, this topic needs to be taught as early as possible. Well, in Israel, it's different because we have those sounds. Children ask why they hear those sounds. However, in other countries, they don't have that. I'm sure there are teachers here. I'm addressing the teachers at this point. First, you need to learn what children know and what is the source of their knowledge. You need to learn what they would like to know. I've been to various places. I've been to Argentina, to Canada. I've been to America many a time, and I spent 3 years in England. I wanted to learn, so the first thing that I did was I picked up Hebrew very fast. I went to this teaching college. Also, I worked as a kindergarten teacher. Children would approach me about why I had this thing written. Well, for 40 years I've been looking for an answer. Mind you, in museum you have 4 books in Polish. They have been translated from Hebrew. Well, for the most part. They are meant to be used in schools.
Co mam powiedzieć?
What else should I say?
Że chciałabym płakać.
Maybe that I would like to cry,
Wyobraź tą przeszłość.
because only with tears I can tell you about this past. I can see so many people here. You are a source of comfort to us.
Żeby pamięć
I hope you will all try to preserve the memory of this place and other sites where people, innocent people, died, people from various nations. I hope that you will make sure you'll bear this responsibility so that this terrible thing will never happen again.
Bardzo dziękujemy.
Thank you so very much.
Szanowni Państwo, o zabranie
Ladies
głosu
and
proszę
gentlemen,
byłą więźniarkę obozu
may I ask a former
panią Elsę Baker.
Auschwitz inmate, Elsa Baker, to take the floor.
Yes, thank you. It is a great privilege to stand here today at this great event, this historic event, when so many people are, I mean, having just listened to that lady's speech, that really upset me. It upset me, despite the fact that I was also in Auschwitz as an 8-year-old girl. But I would like to say that it is an honored for me to be here among so many people who have suffered so greatly, perhaps even much more so than I. And it is, I don't know. I'm upset. You probably can feel that I'm very upset about listening to that lady there. Yes. Yes. It is, you know, I would like to thank the Polish people for having preserved this former camp here and made it into such a world-renowned memorial, Holocaust memorial, which it is today, and where people can come, especially people who are in that category I was in Auschwitz for, which is Sinti and Roma, which, as I know, I lived in England by nearly 60 years, and I know not many people know that Sinti and Roma have greatly suffered under the Nazis, similar to the suffering of Jewish people. And now some Asha will continue talking now, because what I'm saying, I'm blind, I can't look at notes, so what I'm saying comes from the heart, and she will continue now with my speech. She will read it, but I have written it. I have written it, yes.
Mrs. Baker has asked me to deliver the rest of her speech because she is severely sight impaired and she cannot read it herself. In 1944, when I was just an 8-year-old girl, I was taken from my home in Hamburg and deported to the Auschwitz-Birkenau extermination camp. Since my biological mother was a Sinti, the Nazis considered me a gypsy and imprisoned me together with thousands of other Sinti and Roma in the so-called gypsy camp. Almost 90% of a total of 23,000 inmates at the gypsy camp were murdered. Horrible as it was, the extermination camp Auschwitz was just one side of the genocide committed against Sinti and Roma. All over Nazi-occupied Europe, Sinti and Roma were murdered in camps or shot by execution squads. Today we know that around 500,000 Sinti and Roma became victims of a campaign of systematic extermination. In Auschwitz, I witnessed mass murder. There were long queues of people in front of the mass murder facilities like the gas chambers and crematoria, which were not far from our camp's electrified fences. And then the ear-splitting screams started. Orders to stay inside our barracks with doors locked were disobeyed. And we saw a large area of open fire blazing. I, as an 8-year-old girl, overheard adult conversation like, "They must have run out of gas, and they are burning people alive." You might be interested to know that only 6 months ago, I was here at the Auschwitz Memorial commemorating an event that took place there on the 2nd of August 1944. Almost 4,300 men, women, and children from our camp, after one of those Nazi selection processes, were condemned to be murdered that very night. I was among those the Nazis selected to be put into cattle trains and to be deported to Ravensbrück concentration camp. Even today, it's extremely difficult for me to come back to the place of the former concentration camp Auschwitz. I experienced firsthand the effect of anti-Gypsyism, anti-Semitism, and racism. I myself survived Auschwitz to shellac and the selfless act of some of my fellow inmates. For decades, after 1945, the genocide committed against Sinti and Roma was largely ignored. It took a private initiative by Vincent Rose, one of the early activists of the Sinti and Roma civil rights movement, to erect a modest memorial on the site of the former camp to commemorate the Sinti and Roma murdered at Auschwitz. Today, it is the setting for memorial services like the one I attended last August. Those that were murdered and those that survived the camps must never be forgotten. Hopefully, this memorial site and museum will remain here for many years to come as a warning to people not to let racism and insane ideologies backed by wrong sciences like, for example, eugenic, gain power again. May I just say one thing that is very near to me? In times like this, when minorities have to feel vulnerable again, I can only hope that everyone would stand up for democracy and human rights. Thank you.
Szanowni Państwo,
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I now request a testimony from a former inmate of Auschwitz, Mr. Marian Turski.
Moi drodzy towarzysze
My dear comrades of the horrors in the camp, distinguished guests,
szanowni zgromadzeni
distinguished
przyjaciele,
visitors to this place, friends,
jestem jednym
I am
z tych
but
jeszcze
one
żyjących,
of those who are still alive,
nielicznych, którzy
few
byli w tym miejscu
who were here in this place
niemal do ostatniej chwili
almost until the last
przed
moment
wyzwoleniem.
before the liberation.
18 stycznia
On the 18th of January,
zaczęła się moja tak zwana
my
ewakuacja.
so-called evacuation started, evacuation from
która
this camp, from
po
Auschwitz,
6,5 dniach
and
zakończyła
after
się.
6.5 days, it ended.
Okazała się marszem
It
śmierci
turned out to be the death march for more than every other
moich współwięźniów,
co-inmates, my fellow inmates. We walked together as a column of 600 people.
wedle wszelkiego prawdopodobieństwa
According to all
nie
probability,
doczekam już
I will not live to see another jubilee here.
dlatego
This is how it goes.
wybaczcie,
So please
że
forgive
będzie
me
może trochę wzruszenia,
that there will be some emotions in what I'm going to say.
a oto co chciałbym powiedzieć
Now, this is what I would like to say,
mojej córce.
to tell primarily to my daughter,
Ja tu jest na sali,
to my
której dziękuję,
granddaughter who is here in this room, and I would like to thank her for that, to my grandson as well.
o tych, którzy są
But I'm
rówieśnikami
mostly after those who are the peers of my daughter and my grandchildren, the younger generations, especially the youngest, those who are even younger than they are.
Kiedy wybucha wojna światowa, ja
When
byłem nastolatkiem.
the World War broke out, I was but a teenager.
Mój
In the
mój
First World
ojciec
War, my father was a soldier,
i został ciężko poszkodowany
and
w
he was shot into his lungs,
powtarzało
and that kept repeating.
dla naszej rodziny.
That was a drama for our family,
Moja matka
and it went on and on.
z pogranicza
My mother hailed from the Polish-Lithuanian Belarusian borderland. Armies went forth and back. They pillaged, raped,
paliły
burned,
wioski, żeby nie zostawić,
burned villages, not to leave anything for those who were coming after them.
że ja
So you could say that I had first-hand experience of war.
ale mimo wszystko, chociaż
Nonetheless,
tylko
even though
25 lat,
it was only 20, 25 years apart, those times seemed so distant, like those Polish 19th century uprisings, like the French Revolution,
a to było tylko 20 lat.
and that was only 20 years away.
Więc kiedy dzisiaj
So
spotykam się z
When today I meet young people, I perfectly well realize that after 75, if not 80 years,
wydaje się im troszeczkę
people
nudzić. Są troszkę
get
znudzeni
somewhat
tym
bored.
tematem
They
i Holokaust,
find war, Shoah, Holocaust somewhat of a boring subject, just like genocide.
rozumiem.
And I actually understand them.
Dlatego obiecuję wam,
That is why I promise to you,
będę opowiadał wam
the young,
o moich cierpieniach,
that I'm not telling you about my suffering.
o moich przeżyciach.
I'm not telling you about what I experienced, my 2 death marches,
Kończyłem wojnę
how I finished the war
32 kilo
weighing 32 kilo,
na skraju
really on the verge of life,
czerpania. Nie będę opowiadał o czymś, co
utterly
było najgorsze.
exhausted. I'm not telling the things that were worst, the worst, the tragedy of the farewells, of parting with the near and dear, when after the selection you see and you sense their fate.
Nie będę o tym mówił.
No, I'm not telling you about that.
Mojej córce,
What I would like to pass to my daughter, to my grandchildren, and to their generations, I would like to tell you something about you yourselves.
widzę, że jest między nami
I see we have among us the President of Austria,
Aleksander van der Bellen.
Mr. Alexander van der Bellen.
Panie prezydencie,
Do you remember, Mr. President,
prosił mnie
when you
i kierownictwo
hosted me and the management of the International Auschwitz Committee? We discussed those days.
Pan użył takiego
You
sformułowania.
used such a phrase,
Auschwitz ist nicht vom Himmel gefallen.
Auschwitz ist nicht vom Himmel gefallen. Auschwitz did not fall down from the skies.
Powiedzieć, jak to się u nas mówi,
You could say,
to oczywistość.
that's an obvious thing. Absolutely obvious. It did not.
Może się to nawet wydawać
This may even seem a hackneyed phrase, quite commonplace perhaps,
jest
yet
to niesłychanie głęboki
this is a profound
skrót myślowy. Moi drodzy,
shortcut in our thinking,
na chwilę
and it helps to understand certain things.
wyobraźnią
Let's use our imagination and our thoughts
wczesne lata 30.
to get to the early 1930s, to Berlin.
Znajdujemy się
We find ourselves
w centrum Berlina.
in the center of Berlin.
Bayerische Viertel, bawarskie
Bayerische Viertel, the Bavarian District, is the name of that district. It's just 3 stops away from the Tiergarten,
Jest
the
tam
zoo.
dzisiaj stacja metra.
There is a station of the metro there. There is Barishev Park.
I oto jednego dnia
And one day,
w latach 30.
in those early
na
1930s,
ławkach pojawia się przed ławkami pojawia się napis.
you can read
Żydom nie
an
wolno
inscription on the
siadać
benches. Jews must not sit on these benches. You could say, it's unpleasant, it's not fair, it's not right. But after all, there are so many benches around.
No, można ich
You can sit somewhere else. Of course you can.
Pojawia się w tejże dzielnicy, a
In
była to dzielnica
that
zamieszkała
district, and that was a district that was inhabited by intellectuals, by the intelligentsia,
polskiego mieszkańca.
German, of Jewish origin. Albert Einstein used to live there. Nelly Sachs, the Nobel Prize winner,
Polityk, minister
a
spraw zagranicznych.
politician and industrialist, Walter Rathenau, who was Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Jest tam basen pływacki, pływalnia.
There was a swimming pool,
Żydom
and
zabroniony wstęp do tej pływalni.
over its door an inscription read, Jews are forbidden to enter. You could say, well,
Ma tyle
pleasant this is not, but there are so many places in Berlin where you can take a bath or swim, so many lakes, canals, it's nearly like Venice.
Pojawia się
At the same time,
indziej napis Żydom
You can read somewhere else, Jews must not belong to German singing associations. So what? All right. They want to sing, they want to make music. Let them just meet somewhere else, they will do their singing. All right.
napis
What comes up later
rozkaz.
is an order, really, more of an order than of an inscription. Non-Aryan children must not play with Aryan children, with the German children. All right, they'll play on their own. And then you read,
Żydom sprzedajemy chleb i produkty żywnościowe
we
tylko po
only
godzinie
sell bread and food to Jews after 5 p.m. Right? Less choice. This makes your life harder. But after all,
robi zakupy.
after 5 p.m. you can still do your shopping.
Uwaga, uwaga,
Now, I warn you, I'm getting used to a thought.
że można
That
kogoś
thought
wykluczyć.
that someone may be excluded becomes mediated into our lives.
Stygmatyzować.
The thought that somebody can be stigmatized,
Kogoś wyalienować.
that someone may be alienated.
I tak powolutku,
And that's how it is done, step by step.
dzień za dniem,
Slowly,
ludzie zaczynają się
people
oswajać
begin to
i ofiary,
see that this is something normal. Both victims
widzowie,
and the perpetrators, the witnesses, those whom we in English call bystanders,
widzą, wszyscy zaczynają się
those who see it become familiar
i zaczynają się
and
przywykać do myśli
they become
i do idei.
acquainted with that thought, familiar with the idea
Einsteina,
that the minority that produced Einstein, Nelly Sachs, Henry Heine,
Mendelssohnów i wielu nobelistów,
Mendelssohns,
że ona
and many
jest
nobelists,
inna, że ona może
that
być
it is
wypchnięta ze
different,
społeczeństwa,
that it can be pushed beyond the margin of the society, that they are different people, that they are alien people, that they are the people that carry germs, that cause pandemics.
to już jest,
And this now
to jest
is a
niebezpieczne,
horror.
to jest
That's
początek
dangerous.
tego, co
This
za
is
chwilę może
where what may happen soon takes its origin.
I powiem wam,
And let me
jeżeli się nad
tell
tym
you,
zastanowimy,
if you consider that,
weźmiemy sobie słowa
and
pana
if we
prezydenta,
remember the words of Mr. President,
władza
power,
ówczesna, która z jednej strony prowadzi
power
wstydną
that
politykę,
at that time ran sly
żądania
policy. For example, they met all the
nie był
claims of workers. The 1st of May was never celebrated. All right, they gave you a day that was free from work. They introduced Kraftig heute, so a special holiday for workers. They could
bezrobocie.
also fight unemployment. They knew how to play on the dignity of a nation.
Się ze wstydu wersalskiego.
Germans move up from the shame of Treaty of Versailles.
Ta
Have
władza
your
widzi,
pride
że
back.
ludzie tak powoli
And that government also saw
ogarnia
that
znieczulica.
people were slowly engulfed by this lack of sensitivity. They ceased to react to evil. And that was the moment when that government could speed up the process of
Potem
evil.
następuje już
What
gwałtowny,
came later was something that developed immediately. Jews could not get jobs, they could not emigrate,
szybko
and then quickly
do get, do
Jews
Rygi,
would
do
be
Kota,
sent to
do
ghettos,
mojego
to
getta,
Kaunas,
do getta
to
łódzkiego,
Riga, to
getta
my
Lwowskiego.
ghetto, the Litzmannstadt, that's a Łódź ghetto.
Potem
Most people from there were later sent to Kulmhof, Chełmno on the Ner, where they were murdered in lorries with exhaust gases, and the rest will make their way to Auschwitz, where in a very modern way and manner they were murdered with Zyklon B in all those modern gas chambers.
I tutaj, jak widzicie Państwo, tu się
And here
to, co powiedział Pan
you see how the words of the president come true. Auschwitz did not fall suddenly from the skies. It was pittering-pattering in all those tiny steps. It was approaching until what happened here behind me did happen.
Moja córko,
My daughter, my granddaughter,
mojej córki, rówieśnicy mojej wnuczki,
peers of my daughter, peers of my granddaughter,
nie znać nazwiska
you do not have to know the name of Primo Levi. Primo Levi was one of the most famous inmates of this camp.
Primo Levi
Primo Levi
użył kiedyś takiego
once used that phrase,
to się wydarzyło,
this happened,
to znaczy, że się może wydarzyć,
which means that it may happen again,
wydarzyć wszędzie.
which means that it may happen anywhere in this world.
Podzielę się z Wami jednym osobistym wspomnieniem.
May I share one personal memory with you? In 1965,
Na stypendium w Stanach Zjednoczonych
I went for a scholarship to the US, to America,
była ta szczyt badań
and that was the
o prawa ludzkie, o prawa
peak, the acme of that battle for human rights,
ludności
for
afroamerykańskiej.
civil rights, for the Afro-Americans.
Brałem udział
It was my honor to participate in a march with Martin Luther King from Selma to Montgomery. And then people who learned that I had been an inmate of Auschwitz would ask me, how do you think?
Tylko w Niemczech coś takiego mogło być?
Must have been only in
Czy
Germany.
mogłoby być gdzieś indziej?
Or do you think it could happen somewhere else?
Może być u
And then I
was.
told them,
U was
it can
może być,
also happen in
jeżeli
your
się
country,
łamie
in this
prawa
land,
obywatelskie.
when the civil rights are broken,
Mniejszości,
when
jeżeli się je
people
likwiduje,
do not obey the laws of minorities, when you do away with the rights of minorities,
jeżeli nagina się prawo tak jak
if
to
you
przyjął
bend
Selmie,
law,
wtedy
as it
się
was
może
done in
stać.
Selma, this
Co
may
zrobić?
come to be.
Jedyne wyjście
What to do?
mówili mi.
There is only one way out. Only you. If you are capable of defending your constitution, defending your laws and your rights, your democratic order, which is based on the protection of minority rights, only then will you be able to conquer all that evil.
Moi drodzy,
My dear,
my w Europie
here in Europe,
w większości
most of us
wywodzimy się
hail from the tradition
judeo-chrześcijańskiej.
called Judeo-Christian.
Pewno ludzie wierzący,
Both
ale i
the
niewierzący,
believers but also the non-believers
jako swój
assume as their civilizational
kanon
canon
przykazań.
the Ten Commandments.
Mój przyjaciel, najbliższy przyjaciel,
My friend, my closest friend,
Międzynarodowego Komitetu
the president
Oświęcimskiego,
of the International Auschwitz
który niestety
Committee,
tu przemawiał
Roman
tutaj,
Kent,
w tym miejscu,
who
5 lat temu,
spoke here 5
w
years
czasie
ago
poprzedniego jubileuszu.
during the
Nie mógł dzisiaj
previous
przyjechać,
Jubilee. He
przylecieć,
couldn't arrive
wysłał
today, he couldn't fly in today. He's frail, He's been sick lately,
11 przykazanie.
but he invented the 11th commandment. The 11th commandment
Doświadczeniem
that
Shoah,
is an
doświadczeniem
experience of the Shoah, of the Holocaust,
tej strasznej
which is the
epoki
experience
horroru.
of that horrible time of disdain.
11 przykazanie.
And
Nie
that
bądź
11th
obojętny.
is be not indifferent. Thou shall not be indifferent.
I to chciałbym powiedzieć.
And this is what I would like to tell you,
To chciałem powiedzieć
my daughter,
to chciałbym powiedzieć
my grandchildren.
rówieśnikom,
I'd like to tell it to the peers of my daughter, my grandchildren, wherever they live, be it Poland, be it Israel, be it America, be it Western Europe,
tak, w Europie
the Eastern Europe. Yes, precisely, the Eastern Europe. It is very important here. Do not be indifferent when you see lies, historical lies. Do not be indifferent
Nie bądźcie obojętni, kiedy
Do not be
widzicie,
indifferent
że przeszłość
when you see that the past
naciągana do aktualnej
is stretched to fit the current
Nie
political
bądźcie
needs.
obojętni,
Do not be
kiedy
indifferent
jakakolwiek
when
mniejszość
any minority
jest dyskryminowana.
is discriminated,
Istotą demokracji
because
jest
the
to,
essence of
że
democracy
większość rządzi,
is that
a
majority
demokracja na tym
governs,
polega,
but
że
democracy
prawa
hinges
mniejszości
on
muszą być
the rights
chronione.
of minorities being protected, and they have to be protected. At the same time,
Nie bądźcie obojętni,
do not be
kiedy
indifferent
jakakolwiek
when
władza
any
narusza
power or
przyjęte
government
umowy społeczne.
infringes all the social compacts that are there,
Bądźcie
that
wierni
are
przykazaniom.
already extant,
11
and
przykazanie.
keep the
Nie bądź
commandments.
obojętny,
11th,
bo
thou
jeżeli
shalt
nie,
not be
to się
indifferent,
nawet nie obejrzycie,
because if you are,
jak was,
you won't
jak
even
waszych potomków,
notice
jak na waszych
when
potomków,
when your
jak
heirs
Auschwitz nagle spadnie
will
z nieba.
suddenly see an Auschwitz falling down, dropping down from the skies straight on them.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and
zabranie
gentlemen,
głosu proszę byłego
may I
więźnia
ask
Auschwitz,
a
pana
former Auschwitz
Stanisława Zalewskiego.
inmate, Stanisław Zalewski, to take the floor.
Szanowni i dostojni uczestnicy
Dear and
uroczystości
distinguished
obchodów
participants
75.
of the solemn
rocznicy wyzwolenia
commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the liberation of concentration lager Auschwitz, I address my words of respect to all those
pozwoliło uniknąć
who were
przemysłowego
spurred
działania
by the fate from the industrial operations of the German Nazi
i w innych
machine of
obozach
genocide in Auschwitz and other concentration and extermination
Wyrażenie
camps.
bardzo drastyczne,
A
ale prawdziwe.
drastic but true
Mówię
way
o
of
tym
putting it,
z
And I'm referring to the innumerable amounts of human hair, glasses, prostheses, shoes, clothing, and other items used daily by children, women, and men of different nationalities and religions. So the ashes of those people were scattered by the winds of history, but their immortal souls remained in this zone, invisible to humans. And they came here in great numbers, and they are circulating here among us. If we open our hearts, we will hear their cries, their moans and complaints to God. In a place such as this, words fail, and the heart cries out to God in this dreadful silence. Lord, why did you remain silent? In this silence, we bow our heads before the countless people who suffered and were murdered here. Yet, this silence is a loud cry for forgiveness and reconciliation, a prayer to the living God to prevent it from ever happening again. How many questions come to mind here? One in particular keeps coming up. Where was God in those days? Why was he silent? How could he allow so much destruction, this triumph of evil? These were the words of Pope Benedict XVI during his visit to Auschwitz-Birkenau in 2006. A pope from Germany, he went on to say, "We cannot fathom the mystery of God. We see only fragments, and we are lost when we want to become judges of God in history." These words of the Pope became a point of reference for me. One must not rummage through the conscience of people who had experienced a time when people deliberately forgot about another person's right to live. From here onwards, I will be referring to my own path, this path meant on this path I saw the Gestapo headquarters in Warsaw and Pawiak, a prison in Warsaw, the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration and extermination camp, the Mauthausen, Gusen I and Gusen II concentration camps. I was brought to this place in October 1943. I was tagged with a number that was tattooed on the inside of my left forearm. And I received other numbers in Mauthausen and Gusen I, Gusen II. The number from Auschwitz, I've had it for 77 years and it is still legible. It is legible and it is a living witness to unforgettable tragic events. I remember in Auschwitz-Birkenau, I remember naked women being driven in trucks from the barracks to a gas chamber. I can hear them screaming. I can hear it in my subconscious when I remember those events. I recall people nicely dressed, wearing the Star of David armbands, walking around with no signs of fear. A large group of these people were led by just one SS officer, and he led them in the direction of the crematorium. However, only me and a few fellow inmates sitting next to me knew about it. I mean Gusen 1 and Gusen 2. In Gusen 1 and Gusen 2, I witnessed death penalties for observing the rules of one religion. I saw prisoners, sick prisoners, killed in the camp hospital by a functionary prisoner. I saw the suicide of prisoners who threw themselves on this electrified barbed wire fence. On the first day of freedom, I witnessed drastic extrajudicial executions performed by prisoners, functionary prisoners. And it was done because of the sadistic nature. It originated and manifested itself in camp conditions, and these are just a few select examples. To live a normal, creative life, I try not to think about the events that took place in the camp, and I found my own way of doing that. So I took my memories and I put them in this airtight box. I tied a rope to it and I threw it into a river. Occasionally I take it out, and I took it for today's event, but once I've used those, I put them back into this box and put them back into the water. However, once the echoes of the ceremony cease, some memories overcome my defenses. They penetrate my memory, trigger reflections, and some questions that remain unanswered. When I say Pater Noster, pray, I recite a verse. Give us our daily bread today, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. So the question is, what is forgiveness of sins? Is it forgetting the damage that was inflicted? Or maybe it's about refraining from imposing punishment. Or maybe it is about abandoning the right for compensation. Can we forgive those who had this description, Gott mit uns, on the buckles of military belts and killed people with premeditation? Let me emphasize that. It was premeditated. Because war is an art of killing. Whoever kills more wins. War breeds violence on both sides. And the stronger will impose a law, and it can be quite cruel. And war blurs the lines between good and evil. To avoid that, there must be reconciliation between nations. Yet reconciliation without historical truth and forgiveness will only be but a bridge without a railing between the edges of a precipice. You can cross it, but not without fear. Therefore, it is a moral obligation for all those present here to act in such a way that nothing like that ever happens again. Under these inhumane conditions that prevailed in Auschwitz and other concentration camps, prisoners, inmates formed various underground organizations. Their primary goal was that of protecting human life and human dignity. Speaking in modern terms, I was a beneficiary of such an activity, and that made it possible for me to survive temporary breakdowns, to overcome this feeling of hopelessness, both in Auschwitz and other camps. Such actions unleash new energy, strengthen certain bonds, and stimulate a person to act, to overcome one's sense of powerlessness, to overcome this loss of hope. I'll give you two examples. A Franciscan, Father Maximilian Kolbe, voluntarily gave up his life for another person, father of a large family. Cavalry Captain Witold Pilecki voluntarily allowed himself to be imprisoned in KL Auschwitz. He organized or rather, let me phrase that, he fled from Auschwitz to tell the truth about what was happening in Auschwitz-Birkenau. He participated in a uprising in Warsaw, and he was killed by the communist authorities in Poland. So two different people, both incredibly courageous, and they showed heroism and dedication in a place created to exterminate people, and their sacrifice was not in vain. The Witold Pilecki Institute of Solidarity and Martyrdom was established in Poland in 2017. One of the goals of this institute is to commemorate people of different nationalities, victims of German Nazi crimes. And the Maximilian Kolbe Werk Association, established in Germany, has been operating since 1973. It is meant to reach agreement and reconciliation and provide assistance in various forms to former inmates of concentration camps and ghettos, regardless of their religion, their views, and their beliefs. On the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II, the association awarded all former inmates of concentration camps a commemorative medal. The document attached to the medal reads, quote, "You have survived the atrocities and terror prevailing in the camps, but afterwards your lives have been very difficult, and yet in this time you have given great reasons for reconciliation." So on the medal you can find a rose that symbolizes your message, that of reconciliation. We believe that your exemplary behavior will also affect others and will be something to follow, especially to those nations that remain adamant and intransigent. You suffered in camps and ghettos and Nazi prisons. Your life had been difficult after the liberation, but all of that was not in vain. Of this we are truly and deeply convinced. That's how it should be, but it is not. These days, in many regions of the world, people overcome by fanaticism of various kinds, political, racial, and religious, they commit acts of violence to achieve their own personal goals. These acts of violence claims thousands of lives, and that bears the hallmarks of genocide. Has history turned a full circle? I mean a circle propelled and driven by people who do not respect other people's dignity? Dear participants of this commemoration, I am an optimist and I believe in people. So far, in my life, excluding my stay in prisons and concentration camps, I have received more good things than bad things from others. In qualifying human deeds as good or bad, I'm supported by a beautiful woman who has a blindfold on her eyes. In her left hand she carries balance, and in her right hand a sharp sword. I will ask this lady to stay with me. On the 26th of January, yesterday, the President of the Republic of Poland, together with his spouse, presented to former inmates of concentration and extermination camp in Auschwitz-Birkenau medals commemorating the 75th anniversary of the liberation. The medal was founded by the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. Now, there is this message attached to it, and there is this fact that it is the highest Polish authorities presented this medal. And that means that basically it is an unwritten document that documents this tragic history of the Polish nation and other nations during World War II. I deeply believe that this event will be used to act for the benefit of all the remaining witnesses of history.
O zabranie głosu proszę przedstawiciela.
May I now request a representative of the Pillars of Memory, the greatest private donors in the Fund for Authenticism of Auschwitz-Birkenau, Mr. Ronald Lauder.
Your Majesties, Your Excellencies, rabbis, clergy, honored guests, and most importantly, the survivors of Auschwitz-Birkenau who are with us today. This is about you, the survivors, and I cannot begin to tell you how grateful I am that you are here, and in some cases, here with your children and grandchildren. 5 years ago, when I stood here in front of these painful gates, and I admitted that I'm not a survivor, but I am so grateful for the survivors who are here today. I'm not a liberator, although I salute the courage of the veterans who saved us all. I'm here simply as a Jew, and like Jews everywhere, this place, this terrible place called Auschwitz, has sadly become an inseparable part of all of us. Auschwitz is like a terrible scar from a terrible trauma. It never goes away, and the pain never stops. I've always wondered if I had been born in Hungary, where my grandparents were from, instead of New York in February 1944. Would I have lived? The answer is no. I've been one of the 438,000 Hungarian Jews gassed by the Nazis in 1944, right here in Auschwitz. I can assure you, almost all Jews have pondered this question. 75 years ago today, when Soviet troops entered these gates, they had no idea what lay behind them. And since that day, the entire world has struggled with what they found inside. We have all wondered how an advanced country that gave the world great literature and art, science achievement, could sink to an anger, a meanness, a depravity like Auschwitz. But let me be clear. While Germany and Austria created and carry out this shattering evil, practically every other European country helped the Nazis gather up their Jewish citizens. Too many people in too many countries made Auschwitz happen. When European Jews begged the world for a safe harbor, somewhere to go, the entire world turned its back on them. Even my own country, the beacon of freedom, turned out its light on the Jewish people when they needed it most. The United States organized a conference in Evian, France in July 1938 to discuss the Jewish refugee problem. There were a lot of lovely speeches, but America did not let any additional Jewish refugees in, and every other country in attendance followed its lead. There were 32 countries, and none of them, except for the tiny Dominican Republic, wanted any more Jews. Hitler saw this. 4 months later came Kristallnacht, and again, there was no world reaction. Hitler tested the world, and at every step, he saw the truth. The world did not care. That's when he knew he could build this factory of death Evian led to Auschwitz. Kristallnacht led to Auschwitz. World anti-Semitism led to Auschwitz. Thankfully, there were some people throughout Europe who had a moral decency and acted differently. Ordinary people who risked their lives and their families' lives to save other human beings. Sometimes people they didn't even know. In Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, you will see 27,362 names on what we call the righteous among nations. These Gentiles who risked everything to save Jewish lives, we have not forgotten. These honorable men and women who we will never, never, never forget. God bless them. Five years ago, at the 70th anniversary, I was very concerned about the shocking rise of anti-Semitism here in Europe. Today, you all know the attacks on Jews, the killings, the vicious slanders have only grown worse, and they have spread to my own country. 75 years ago, when the world finally saw the pictures of the gas chambers here and the piles of bodies, nobody in their right mind wanted to be associated with the Nazis. But now, I see something I never thought I would see in my lifetime: the open and brazen spread of anti-Jewish hatred throughout the world once again. In 2020, we hear the same lies the Nazis used so effectively in their propaganda. They said, Jews have too much power. Jews control the economy and the media. Jews control governments. Jews control everything. We hear this madness online, in the media, and even within democratic governments. We will never eradicate anti-Semitism. It's a deadly virus that's been with us for over 2,000 years. But we cannot look the other way and pretend that it doesn't happen. That's what people did throughout the 1930s, and that is what led to Auschwitz. There are 50 countries represented here today. I know each and every one of you is as disgusted by anti-Semitism as I am. You also know that you alone cannot stop this, but all of you can certainly speak out forcefully against it. We can't rewrite history, but we can be much more forceful today. All of us must remember those brave, moral people who tried to stop this. As all world leaders, all politicians must lead in this effort. Words are not enough. Political speeches are not enough. Laws must be passed, severe, tough, real laws that will put these hate mongers away in prison for a long time. Children must be educated to know where the hatreds of Jews lead. Those are all important. But there's another vital way for world leaders today to fight this age-old hatred. I've asked all countries to stop casting votes in favor of the UN's constant and shameful fixation on Israel. Exactly 3 years, 3 months, and 3 weeks after the liberation of Auschwitz, the Jewish people realized their 2,000-year-old dream and founded the Jewish state of Israel. If for no other reason than the fact that not a single country on earth would take in Jewish refugees when they beg for their lives. That is why the Jewish people need Israel. 75 years ago, the Jewish people left Auschwitz. They fled Europe. They were forced out of every country in the Middle East. And instead of living in refugee camps and turning to terror, they built a vibrant democracy in a place where democracy does not exist. They have created miracle after miracle while having to defend their existence every single day. No other country on earth has had to do this. And for this, the UN, some journalists, even some government leaders constantly condemn it. But it's even worse. Israel has been singled out over and over again with the same lies that we heard about the Jewish people for centuries. Over the last 7 years alone, the United Nations General Assembly has adopted 202 resolutions condemning countries around the world. Of those 202 resolutions, Israel was condemned 163 times, and the rest of the world only 39. 163 against Israel, 39 for the rest of the world. We all know these votes are absurd. The UN ignores true evil dictatorships that kill millions of their own people. And it's clear as day that this kind of obsessive anti-Zionism is nothing but anti-Semitism. I realize that here at Auschwitz, you are surrounded by numbers. 75 years, 1933, 1938, 6 million. But there's one number that still shocks us while breaking our hearts at the same time. 1,500,000, that's the number of Jewish children, 1.5 million, who died in the Holocaust. It's so painful, we try not to think about it. It just hurts too much. Had these 1.5 million children been allowed to live like others children around the world, they would now be in their 70s and 80s. They would have been educated. They would have married. They would have had children of their own. Such a loss. But something else as well. What could these 1.5 million children have created for us all? What symphonies, what great literature, what technology, what medical breakthroughs do we lose from these lost souls? There is one more part of the Auschwitz story that no one ever talks about. When the survivors were liberated from this Nazi nightmare, they never sought revenge. They lost their mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers. In too many cases, they lost their wives and their children. And in spite of this, not one German was killed in retribution by a Jew. Not one. Think about that for a moment. After everything that happened to them, these Jewish survivors walked out of these gates and went on to build new lives, raise new families, work hard and create. Some grandchildren here today. And it is shameful that 75 years later, they now see that their grandchildren face the same hatred again. This is a shame and must never be tolerated. In the end, I'm afraid that all these numbers, 1.5 million children, 6 million Jews, these numbers are just too hard to comprehend. So let me leave you with one last story. It comes from the Eichmann Trial in 1961, where witness after witness described their experience here at Auschwitz. But there was one man who stood out because he spoke in an unusually non-emotional tone. He described arriving on this platform here, right here, with his wife and little daughter. They were herded out of the cattle cars, and they stood in line for the selection. Right over there, a doctor would decide who would go to the right to work and who would go to the left for extermination. This man was separated from his wife and daughter at that moment, and they were pushed away. On the witness stand, he said, "There were so many people, I didn't know how I could keep my eye on them." But his little girl wore a red coat, and he was able to watch the little red coat until it got smaller and smaller, and then he couldn't see it anymore. The young Israeli prosecutor, Gabriel Bach, was standing at his chair when the man finished like this. He stood there silently. Finally, the judge asked Bach to continue, but he stood there. Again, the judge told Bach to continue. And again, he just stood there silently. Years later, Bach explained that as fate would have it, he and his wife had just bought their 3-year-old daughter a little red coat. And Gabriel Bach said, to this day, if he goes to a sports stadium or a restaurant or just waiting down the street in Jerusalem and he sees a girl in a little red coat, his throat will tense and he cannot speak. Frankly, after this story, whenever I see a red coat and a little girl, I think the same thing. This is the legacy of Auschwitz, and it will never go away. To every Jewish person and non-Jewish person in this audience who leaves these gates today, we must do this. When we hear something that is anti-Semitic, when we hear someone talk about Israel unjustly, when Jews are attacked in our streets, do not be silent. Do not be indifferent. Do not just do this for the Jewish people around the world. Do this for your children. Do this for your grandchildren. But also do this for the little girl who, in the red coat, whose ashes lay 300 meters away, along with 1 other million tortured souls. They are watching us today, and I cry out in one shattering chorus, do not be silent. Do not be complacent. Do not let this ever happen again to any people. Thank you.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen,
zapraszamy do obejrzenia filmu pod
we
tytułem
would like to show you
Oni byli tacy
a
jak my.
video objects.
They were just like us.
They were just like us.
Przygotowanego na 75.
And
rocznicę
this video has been
zwolnienia
prepared for the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the former German Nazi concentration and extermination camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Szanowni Państwo, oddaję głos
Ladies
panu
and
dyrektorowi,
gentlemen,
opiekunowi
I would like
miejsca
to
pamięci,
give the floor
doktorowi Piotrowi Cywińskiemu.
to the steward of Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial, Mr. Piotr Cywiński.
Od wyzwolenia Konzentrationslager Auschwitz.
It has been 75 years since the liberation of
I dziś
Konzentrationslager
jest wśród
Auschwitz.
nas ponad 200
We
osób,
have among us today
które przeszły
over
przez to
200 people who experienced
tak
this hell.
trudno dla nas
Hell
wyobrażalne piekło.
that we cannot even
Dziękuję
imagine.
wam, drodzy.
Thank you so very much.
To, co mówiliście jeszcze w
What
obozie
you have been
i poprzez te 70
saying
lat,
through all those 75 years, what you said back in the camp was never
nie
again.
dla siebie
Not for yourselves, but for us,
i dla naszych dzieci
our children
i wnuków.
and grandchildren.
Na waszym doświadczeniu
We built
budowaliśmy
this post-war
powojenny świat.
world on our experience, on your experience, so we do owe you something. We all do.
Świat miał przecież wyglądać inaczej.
The world was meant to be
Organizacja Narodów
different. The
Zjednoczonych
United
miała być
Nations
gwarantem pokoju.
was to be the guarantor of peace.
Zbrodnie przeciwko ludzkości
Crimes
miały być
against
ścigane
humanity
bez końca.
were to be always
Współpraca i
prosecuted.
współzależność międzynarodowa
International
miała
cooperation
oddalać
and
konflikty.
interdependence were intended to deter conflicts.
Ekumenizm miał zbliżać
Ecumenism
ludzi wiary.
was supposed to bring people of faith together.
Tymczasem dziś
Today,
z każdej
however,
niemalże strony widać
from
odradzanie
almost
się.
every corner of the world, we can see the revival
Nasilają się
of old
antysemityzm,
specters.
rasizm,
Anti-Semitism, racism, and xenophobia are on the
wrogu
increase.
odradzającego się populizmu i demagogii
In
wzmacniają
darkness,
się.
the resurgence of
ideologie
populism
pogardy i
and
nienawiści.
demagogy strengthen ideologies of
A my?
contempt and hatred.
Stajemy się
And we
coraz bardziej
are becoming
obojętni,
increasingly
zamknięci w sobie,
indifferent,
apatyczni.
confined within ourselves, apathetic, passive.
Nie widzimy i nie chcemy widzieć.
We do not see,
Nie mówimy i nie chcemy mówić.
and we cannot see, we do not talk,
Większość milczała,
we
gdy
do not want to
tonęli
talk.
Syryjczycy.
The majority was silenced when the Syrians drowned.
Odwróciliśmy się od
In
konfliktu.
silenced, In silence, we turned our backs on the Congolese.
Niemalże słowa, gdy 2 lata
We
temu
practically did not utter a word when the Rohingya were murdered 2 years ago.
okrywamy tragiczny los Ujgurów.
And today, with silence, we
A cisza po
conceal the
Holokauście
tragic
nie jest
fate
ludzka.
of the Uyghurs. Silence after the Holocaust is inhuman, and never again will it be human.
Milczenie
Besides
naszą dotkliwą klęską.
the Holocaust, our silence today
Własnym
is our greatest disaster,
tak
our
właśnie
self-dehumanization.
człowieczeniem.
Yes, that is correct. Self-dehumanization.
Świata
The righteous among the nations did not
nie pisali protestów,
click on likes. They
nie podpisywali petycji
were not known for
online.
writing protest songs,
Oni
nor did they
dokonywali
sign online petitions.
nieskończonego dobra,
They performed boundless good in dramatic conditions,
ratując konkretnego.
rescuing concrete individuals.
Ale tylko dlatego zachowali twarz i godność,
But that is the only reason
z całą
that
naszą kulturą
why they saved their face and their
na
dignity.
ich tle
And
dzisiaj.
how do we, with all our culture and memory, compare ourselves to them
Gorsza od
today?
zapomnienia jest taka pamięć,
Worse than forgetting
która nie rozbudza w nas
is
moralnego
a
niepokoju.
memory that does not
Ginie wówczas owo nigdy więcej.
bring any moral concern within us.
75 lat po Auschwitz
It is
właśnie
then
w
that the
pamięci
never again is lost. 75 years after
dla naszej
Auschwitz,
dzisiejszej
it is in fact
odpowiedzialności.
in memory that we must search for
Jakże często w
sources for our
pamięci szukamy
responsibility
jedynie
today.
krótkotrwałych
Meanwhile,
wzruszeń,
in our
bez
memories, we
konsekwencji,
often only
bez
seek
zobowiązań.
short-lived emotions without
Pamięć traci swój sens.
consequence, without
Jak mówić
obligation.
nigdy
Such memory
więcej,
loses its
patrząc
significance.
w oczy
How can one say
atakowanym na
never
ulicy
again while looking into the eyes of the Jews attacked on
ludziom
the
na całym
streets,
świecie,
to
prześladowanym
the
mniejszości,
Roma being humiliated, people all over the world, persecuted minorities, refugees, the starving, the murdered, the hundreds of thousands of people incarcerated in various camps?
zamordowany w Birkenau,
Salman Gradowski, who was murdered here in Birkenau, was right when he wrote shortly before the Sonderkommando revolt, "We have a dark premonition because we know."
my także wiemy,
We also know
czuwamy, czym stał
and
się nasz świat,
feel
gdzie i
what
dlaczego
has become of our
rozchwaliliśmy
world.
nasze podstawowe fundamenty.
Where and why did we squander our basic fundamental values? Where is our own
Każdego z nas.
individual responsibility, the responsibility of each and every single one of
Kiedyż
us?
więc Auschwitz stanie się
So,
rzeczywistością
when will Auschwitz
przezwyciężoną i
become
wyzwoloną.
a reality that has been overcome and
W
liberated?
istocie krzyku nigdy więcej,
In the very essence of this cry,
wyzwolenie Auschwitz
never
dzieje się
again,
także dziś,
the liberation of Auschwitz also continues today,
codziennie.
right here, right now, every day.
Szanowni Państwo, zapraszam do wspólnego...
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I invite you to a prayer. Let's pray together for those murdered in Auschwitz. Those who feel they can do it standing, please, let's stand up.
Proszę pana Dawida Wiśnie,
May I now ask Mr. David Wiśnia, a survivor of Auschwitz, to pray El Mal Rahamim and Kaddish.
El Malay Rachamim Sochen Bam Romim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanpei Hashchina B'ma'alot Kedoshim u'tehorim Kezoar Akiyah Mazirim Et Nishmot Halelei HaShoah B'Europa B'chol ha'olam Auschwitz, Dachau, Birkenau, שהולכו שנהרגו ונשחטו ונשרפו ושנשרפו כל מיליוני היהודים על קידוש השם בידי המרצחים הגרמנים הנאצים ועוזריהם והלכו לעולמם. לכן בעל הרחמים ישתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם, אדוני הוא נחלתם. וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן. We continue with the Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. Please join me, those who can. B'alma divrach yivrutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Elam Ulol Meol Maya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpar Toromam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shmei Dekutsha Berichu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbachata V'nechemata Damiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol ha'olam v'nomar amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Proszę Jego Ekscelencję, arcybiskupa Salvatore Pennacchio, o odmówienie modlitwy Wieczny Odpoczynek, oratio pro fidelibus
to pray oratio pro fidelibus defunctis in Latin.
Oremus, animabumus Domine, famulorum tuarum misericordiam concede perpetuam, ut eis proficiat in aeternum, quod in te speraverunt et crediterum. requiem aeternam, dona est Domine, et lux perpetua lucet eis, requiescant in pace. Amen.
Proszę Jego Ekscelencję
Could His Excellency Piotr Gregor, Bishop of the Catholic Church, now pray Wieczny Odpoczynek, Oratorio pro Fidelibus Defunctis in Polish.
Wieczny odpoczynek racz im dać, Panie, a światłość wiekuista niechaj im świeci, niech odpoczywają w pokoju wiecznym. Wieczny odpoczynek racz im dać, Panie, a światłość wiekuista niechaj im świeci, niech odpoczywają w pokoju wiecznym. Wieczny odpoczynek racz im dać, Panie, a światłość wiekuista niechaj im świeci, niech odpoczywają w pokoju wiecznym. Amen.
Proszę wielebnego księdza
Reverend Father Mikołaj Dziewiatowski of Polish Autocephalic Orthodox Church,
Boże duchów,
could you please say the prayer, God of spirits and all the flesh, in Old Church Slavonic?
Господу помолимся, Господи помилуй, Боже духов и всякая плоти, смерть поправи, дьявою празднивый и живот миру Твоему даровавый. Сам Господи покой душу усопших раб Твоих, всех зде погибших, вместе светло, вместе злачне, вместе покойне. От нюды же отбеже болезнь, печали и воздыхание, всякое согрешение, содеянное или словом, или делом, или помышлением, яко благий человеколюбец Бог, прости, яко не с человек и же будет не согрешить, Ты, бо един токмо без греха, правда Твоя правда во веки, и Слово Твое есть истина, яко Ты си воскресение и живот и покой усопших раб Твоих, всех зде погибших, Христе Боже наш, и Тебе славу воссылаем, со безначальным Твоим Отцем и пресвятым и благим, и животворящим Твоим Духом, ныне и пресно, и во веки веков.
Proszę Jego
Excellency Adrian Korczago, Bishop of the Diocese of Cieszyn of the Evangelical Augsburg Church, please say the prayer, a memory of the dead, in Polish.
Wszechmogący Boże, przed Twoim obliczem wspominamy dziś tych, którzy na tym szczególnym miejscu kaźni bestialsko byli mordowani. Ufamy, że w Tobie, naszym Bogu, znaleźli wybawienie z cierpienia, doświadczyli zwycięstwa życia nad śmiercią i obdarowani zostali wiecznością. Wspomóż nas, abyśmy, czerpiąc naukę z przeszłości, przezwyciężali w sobie wszelką niechęć do drugiego człowieka. Motywuj nas do życia w pokoju, zgodzie i miłości. Amen.
Szanowni Państwo, proszę
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I now ask everyone to take their seats. In a moment, the 4 speakers, survivors of the Shoah, and the presidents of the state delegations will be asked to get ready to go to the monument to the victims. The people who will remain here in the tent in front of the gate of death will be able to watch the ceremony. Once again, I'm requesting that all of you, apart from the survivors and the heads of state delegations, may stay. Now an homage will be paid to those murdered in Auschwitz. Let the lights that we are going to leave there be a sign of commemorating and paying homage to all the victims. After the homage ceremony, the delegations will return to the tent.
Szanowni Państwo, wysłuchali Państwo następujących.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have listened to the following pieces of music. String Quartet number 5, opus 27 by Mieczysław Weinberg. Requiem for Auschwitz by Roger Moreno Rathgeb. Trio Lento, Gideon Klein. Lament of the Earth by Daria Potsulda. Now, during the passage of the delegation to the monument to the victims in Birkenau, you will have an opportunity to hear Alexander Lassogn's Serena, which is the third movement from the fifth string quartet, Antonin Dvořák, the second movement from the string quartet in F major, opus 96, Arvo Pärt's Fratres, four-string quartet. The music is performed by chamber musicians of the New Music Orchestra, Irena Kalinowska-Gross, first violin, Agnieszka Lassoń, second violin, Aleksandra Badok, viola, Donata Sobik, cello, and Alicia Monitoris, flute.
będzie powrócić.